At my sister's wedding reception, champagne flowed freely for 200 guests, except me. My mother set a plate of cold leftovers before me and said, "This is all the useless deserve." I stood to leave to spare myself further humiliation. Then the groom froze, staring at me. "Boss, what are you doing here?" In one breath, the room tilted on its axis. I was no longer the discarded daughter, but the woman holding files that could shred both their family tree and their bank accounts. And tonight, I wouldn't shed tears. I would turn on the screen. My name is Olivia Mercer, though everyone here calls me Nell when they bother to call me anything at all. Table 23 sits in the darkest corner of Rosemont Hall's grand ballroom, its back pressed against the service wall where waiters dodge in and out with champagne flutes that never reach my glass. The ivory tablecloth bears a faint coffee stain from some previous event, hastily covered with a doily that doesn't quite match. Even the centerpiece, a tired arrangement of baby's breath and carnations, looks salvaged from the lobby. The chandeliers drip crystal light everywhere but here. I watch it pull on Morgan's dress as she glides between tables, her laughter tinkling like the champagne glasses she lifts in endless toasts. My sister, the bride, hasn't looked in my direction once tonight. Neither has William, our father, though I catch him stealing glances when he thinks no one's watching his fingers worrying the stem of his glass. But it's Victoria who commands the room like a general surveying her victory. My mother weaves through the crowd in her mother of the bride couture, a shade of champagne that cost more than most cars accepting compliments with practiced grace. When she finally approaches my exile corner, her heels click against the marble like a countdown. "Still sulking." She sets the plate before me with deliberate force. The porcelain clatters against the table, drawing eyes from nearby tables before they quickly look away. On it, congealed mashed potatoes, a grayish slice of beef already curling at the edges, green beans that have surrendered their color to time. The sauce has formed a skin. "The kitchen was going to throw it out," she continues loud enough for table 22 to hear. "But I thought waste, not want, not. After all, we've already spent so much on guests who actually matter." The couple at the adjacent table shifts uncomfortably. The woman touches her pearls. The man becomes fascinated with his cufflinks. They know what they're witnessing, but etiquette demands they pretend otherwise. I study the plate with the same detachment I use for quarterly reports. Calculate the deliberateness of this moment. Not just the leftovers, but the timing, the volume, the positioning where maximum witnesses can observe my humiliation, while maintaining plausible deniability. Victoria has always been a master of the public wound. Nothing to say. She leans closer and I catch her perfume. Chanel number 5, same as always, though tonight it mingles with something sharper. Satisfaction, perhaps. 20 years of silence and still nothing. At least Morgan knows how to be grateful. Behind her, the reception continues its orchestrated perfection. The band slides into something classic and safe, Sinatra maybe. Couples drift toward the dance floor. The photographer captures moments that will look flawless in albums. Nathan spinning Morgan, her train swirling like cream in coffee. William raising his glass in yet another toast. Cousins and colleagues arranged in careful hierarchies of importance. I don't belong in those pictures. I haven't belonged in any family photo for over a decade. Not since I turned 18, and Victoria made it clear that my invitation to exist under her roof had expired. "Adults make their own way," she'd said. Then, the same week, she'd thrown Morgan a birthday party that cost more than my college tuition. The beef on my plate has the texture of leather. I cut a piece anyway, raise it to my mouth, chew slowly, let her see that even her leftovers can't break me. Around us, the tables gleam with real silverware and crystal, each place setting a small fortune. The irony isn't lost on me, this temple to excess. And here I sit with scraps. "You could have tried harder," Victoria says, adjusting her bracelet. Diamonds catch the light like tears. "Could have been someone. Instead, you insist on this. Whatever it is you do. Office work." She pronounces it like a disease. If she only knew. But that's the point. She doesn't know because she never asked. Never looked beyond her own reflection long enough to see what I was building in the shadows she cast. The name Olivia Mercer appears nowhere in her social circles. Olivia Mercer Wells, however, that name carries weight in boardrooms she'll never enter. A waiter hovers nearby, champagne bottle poised. Victoria waves him away from my table with a gesture so small, so practiced. He might think he imagined the instruction, but I see it. I see everything from table 23. This perfect vantage point for observation. How Morgan's smile tightens when certain guests approach. How Nathan's jaw clenches when William attempts another rambling toast. How the wedding planner keeps checking her phone, her expression cycling through stages of barely contained panic. I should go, I say. The words come out steady, controlled. I set down my fork with deliberate calm, dab my lips with the paper napkin. Of course, it's paper, not cloth like the other tables. Yes, Victoria agrees too quickly. That would be best. We wouldn't want you to. But she doesn't finish because that's when Nathan sees me. Really sees me for the first time tonight. He's been making rounds with Morgan playing the perfect groom. But something makes him glance toward the shadows where table 23 huddles. His champagne glass stops halfway to his lips. Color drains from his face like water from a tub. Our eyes lock across the wasteland of his wedding reception, and I watch recognition bloom like a bruise. He knows that face. He's seen it every Monday morning for the past 18 months. Running meetings where million-dollar decisions hang on my approval, where his proposals live or die by my pen stroke. The glass slips from his hand. Crystal shatters against marble. The sound slicing through Sinatra and small talk like a scalpel. The entire room turns, Morgan included, to see what's broken. But Nathan isn't looking at the glass. He's looking at me. And his mouth is already forming the words that will shatter so much more than crystal. Boss, what are you doing here? The shattered glass creates a perfect silence, crystalline and sharp. In that pause before chaos, I remain seated at table 23, hands folded, watching the shock ripple outward from Nathan like disturbed water. I've learned to read rooms the way others read spreadsheets. Every micro-expression a data point, every gesture a leading indicator. Victoria's face cycles through confusion to irritation. She hasn't connected the dots yet, but her social radar picks up the disturbance. Morgan rushes to Nathan, her train, catching on a chair, yanking her back for a moment. A puppet jerked by its strings. The wedding planner materializes with towels and apologies. But Nathan remains frozen, staring at me like I'm a ghost at the feast. Which, in a way, I am. I've spent 14 years learning to navigate shadows, to read the unguarded moments when people think no one's watching. It's a skill born of necessity, honed by exile. At 18, Victoria didn't just cut off my college fund. She performed a surgical extraction of my existence from the family narrative. No announcement, no drama. One day, I simply wasn't included anymore. Not in the Christmas card photos, not in the group texts, not in the story she told at her charity luncheons about her daughter. Singular. Always singular. The waitstaff had swept away the glass shards now, but the tension remains glittering in the air. I take a sip of water, flat, no lemon, another small slight, and let my mind drift back to those first brutal months. 3 jobs, pre-dawn shifts at a bakery, afternoons filing paperwork at a law firm, nights cleaning offices in the very building where I now command a corner suite. My fingers remember the ache of kneading dough, the paper cuts from endless filing, the chemical burn of industrial cleaners. Morgan had been in private school, then complaining about the stress of choosing between Yale and Princeton. The same week I'd eaten nothing but rice and stolen sugar packets, she'd posted photos from her spa weekend in Scottsdale. "Self-care is health-care," the caption read. Victoria had liked it within minutes. I learned to budget my anger like everything else, carefully, strategically. Each slight cataloged but not dwelt upon. Energy was currency, and I couldn't afford to spend it on resentment. Not when rent was due. Not when I had night classes to attend with eyes burning from exhaustion. Not when I was building something they couldn't see from their perch atop inherited privilege. Nell. William appears at my table, hovering like he's afraid to fully commit to the interaction. My father, though the term feels generous for a man who mastered the art of being present, but not there. How are you? I'm well. True enough, wellness, I've learned, has nothing to do with happiness. He shifts his weight, glances back toward Victoria, who's now cornering Nathan with the efficiency of a border collie. Your mother, she's... I know what she is. The words come out sharper than intended. William flinches, and for a moment I see him clearly. Not the patriarch he plays at these events, but a man who chose the path of least resistance so many times it became his only road. There's something in his eyes, though, a flicker of what regret recognition, or just the weighted exhaustion of a man who knows he's complicit in crimes he lacks the courage to name. I put something aside, he says quietly. Words rushed like he's stealing this moment. Years ago before. He stops, jaw working. It's not enough. Not nearly, but it's yours. Has been since you were 16. The papers are in my study. If you ever... William, Victoria's voice cuts through like a blade. She's managed to steer Nathan away from the spill site, but her eyes are fixed on us, on William, specifically, with a look that promises consequences. The Weatherbys are asking for you. He straightens automatically. Decades of trained response. But before he goes, his hand brushes the table near mine. Not quite touching, but close. The combination is your real birthday, he murmurs. Not the one she tells people. Then he's gone absorbed back into the machinery of the reception, and I'm left processing this information. My real birthday. Because of course Victoria would change even that, shaving 2 years off my age when Morgan came along. So the gap between us would seem smaller, so her narrative of 2 daughters, practically twins, would sell better at her book club. I know exactly which safe he means, the one in his study that Victoria pretends doesn't exist. Behind the portrait of her grandmother, a woman who'd built the fortune Victoria now deploys like a weapon. Another woman erased from her own story, reduced to a checkbook and a legacy to be leveraged. The band strikes up something contemporary, Bruno Mars maybe, and the younger guests fled the dance floor. Morgan's sorority sisters form a squealing cluster, pulling her into their midst, while Nathan remains notably absent. I spot him near the bar downing what appears to be straight whiskey, while the wedding planner hovers anxiously. He knows he's blown something wide open. He just doesn't know how wide or how deep. Because Nathan Wright only knows Olivia Mercer Wells, the woman who restructured his entire division, who caught the discrepancies in his budget proposals that would have tanked his career, who promoted him anyway, because she values competence over compliance. He knows his boss, brilliant, demanding fair. He doesn't know Nell, the discarded daughter nursing table scraps in the corner. The cognitive dissonance must be staggering. I could leave now, slip out while Victoria's distracted, while the party spins on without me. It would be the path of least resistance, the one William would take. But I'm not William. I'm not even Nell anymore. Not really. That girl, desperate, hungry, afraid she served her purpose. She survived long enough to become someone else. The Iron Ledger. That's what they call me at Blackwell Financial, though never to my face. Coined by someone in accounting who noticed I caught every irregularity, every attempted shortcut. They mean it as a warning, maybe even an insult. They don't understand that when you've counted every penny for survival, when you've weighed the cost of eating today against eating tomorrow, financial vigilance becomes more than a skill. It becomes a language. And I'm fluent. Movement in my peripheral vision. The wedding planner approaches with the determined stride of someone about to manage a situation. But she stops short. Something in my expression giving her pause. I know that look. I've worn it in boardrooms when the numbers don't lie, and someone has to deliver truth to power. Is there... She begins, then recalibrates. Would you like anything from the bar, perhaps? Or the dessert table is about to... No. She retreats and I return to my observation post. Morgan's dancing now, laughing at something one of her friends says. The light catches her necklace. Our grandmother's pearls, the ones Victoria claimed were lost in a move. So many things got lost when I turned 18. My childhood photos, my grandmother's letters, my place at the table. But not everything can be erased. Paper trails have a way of surviving, especially when you know where to look. When you have access to systems that cross-reference data. When your job involves tracking down financial irregularities across decades of corporate mergers and acquisitions. When you discover quite by accident that your sister's official birthday doesn't match her hospital records. That your mother's maiden name appears on property transfers in counties where she claims never to have lived. That money meant for education moved in patterns that would make any auditor's eyes narrow. I didn't go looking for secrets, but secrets I've learned have a way of finding those who know how to read between lines. And I've been reading between lines since I was 18, parsing the subtext of my exile, decoding the logic of my erasure. The music swells, the party spins, and I sit at table 23 with my cold leftovers and my careful observations. Victoria thinks she's won something tonight. She thinks this public humiliation is her masterstroke, her final proof that I am what she's always said. Nothing. No one. Not worth the space I occupy. She's wrong. I'm exactly where I need to be. The name Olivia Mercer appears on no family Christmas cards, no wedding invitations, no society pages. It died the day I turned 18, buried under Victoria's practiced indifference. But Olivia Mercer Wells, she was born in a different world entirely. One Victoria would never think to search. The hyphen came from my grandmother's maiden name, Wells, a small rebellion that became a resurrection. When I filled out that first application at Blackwell Financial fresh from my night school MBA, fingers still cramped from years of minimum wage labor, I wrote it with the deliberation of someone choosing their own baptism. Olivia Mercer Wells, reborn in paperwork, sanctified by corporate letterhead. 7 years. That's how long I've lived this double life. Though double implies some kind of balance. There's no balance here. There's the tissue-thin existence of Nell trotted out for obligatory family gatherings, where I hover at the edges like a bad smell. And there's Olivia Mercer Wells, who arrives at the office before dawn and leaves after the cleaners, who built an empire of efficiency one spreadsheet at a time. The transformation wasn't sudden. Survival rarely is. First came the entry-level position in accounts receivable, grinding through invoices while my supervisor took credit for my catches. I remember the exact moment I decided to stop being grateful for scraps, standing in the break room listening to executives complain about their ski trips while I calculated whether I could afford both lunch and bus fare. Something crystallized then, hard and bright as the diamonds Victoria waves like weapons. I would not just survive, I would surpass. The Blackwell Financial Building rises 30 floors above the financial district, glass and steel and ambition. My office sits on 28, corner view, the kind of space that announces its occupant matters. The brass nameplate reads, Olivia Mercer Wells, Acting Chief Operating Officer. Acting? Because the board hasn't confirmed me yet. Acting? Because I'm still proving what everyone else inherited by birthright. But in that office, I'm not acting at all. My team knows this. They've learned to read my silences to prepare for the questions I'll ask before I ask them. When I restructured the Midwest division cutting redundancies with surgical precision, they called me cold. When those changes saved 40 jobs that would have been lost to bankruptcy, they called me nothing at all. Success, I've learned, is often met with silence from those who predicted failure. Nathan learned this during his first presentation to me. He'd come in cocky, all Harvard MBA confidence and family connections, pitching a marketing strategy built on assumptions and wishful thinking. I let him finish, then dissected every flaw with the same methodical care I once used scrubbing office floors. His face had gone through the same phases as Victoria's tonight. Confusion, irritation, then something closer to fear. Redo it, I'd said, and this time use actual data. He did. Came back with something brilliant, actually. That's when I knew he had potential. Not because of his first effort, but because of his second. Because he could take criticism without crumbling, could rebuild without resentment. So I promoted him 6 months later, doubled his salary, gave him the kind of opportunity that changes trajectories. He never asked why someone named Mercer Wells would show such interest in developing talent, never connected the dots between his boss and the shadow at his future-in-law's gatherings. Why would he? The woman who signs his reviews wears Armani, not department store clearance. She speaks in quarterly projections and market analyses, not in careful silences. She exists in a world where merit matters more than maiden names, where genealogy bows to ROI. The Iron Ledger. The nickname followed my reputation through the building like a contrail. First whispered by a junior analyst who tried to slip personal expenses through a project budget, then adopted by others who learned that nothing escaped my review. They think it refers only to my attention to detail, my intolerance for financial creativity. They don't understand it goes deeper. When you've survived on $70 for 2 weeks, when you've chosen between electricity and food, you develop an intimate relationship with numbers. They stop being abstractions. Each digit represents something real: a meal, a bus ride, a textbook, a chance. You learn to see waste like a neon sign, inefficiency like a personal insult. That analyst who tried to expense his girlfriend's dinner, I didn't fire him. I called him in, showed him exactly how his attempted theft, because that's what it was, theft would have impacted the departmental budget, how it would have meant no intern program next quarter, how those internships were lifelines for kids like I'd been, working 3 jobs to pay for school. He resigned 2 weeks later, but before he left, he stopped by my office. "You were right," he said, "about all of it." I was. I always am. When it comes to the numbers, they don't lie, don't play favorites, don't care about your last name or your mother's social standing. They are what they are, immutable and honest in ways people rarely manage. The investigation into my family's finances started accidentally. A routine audit of a shell company that had once contracted with Blackwell Financial. Standard due diligence, the kind of archaeological dig we do before major mergers. But the name on one of the old contracts made me pause. Victoria's maiden name from before she married into the Mercer fortune. Curiosity, not vengeance, made me dig deeper. Professional habits kicked in. Follow the money, trace the patterns, document everything. What I found was a masterclass in financial manipulation. Decades of careful redirections and paper trails that led nowhere until you knew which stones to turn. Morgan's trust fund, established by our father's parents, drained systematically, recorded as educational expenses that somehow never resulted in tuition payments. Property transfers in counties where no Mercer had ever lived, but where a young woman named Morgan Hale had been born to parents who died in a car accident when she was 2. Adoption papers filed 3 months later. Victoria's signature careful and precise. The truth assembled itself like a spreadsheet, each cell revealing another calculation. Victoria hadn't just adopted Morgan, she'd acquired her, complete with a modest inheritance that became significantly less modest once properly invested. Or it would have if those investments hadn't been redirected into Victoria's own accounts, disguised as childcare costs that exceeded most people's mortgages. I documented everything with the same meticulous care I applied to corporate audits. Not because I planned to use it. Knowledge itself was enough then, a secret counterweight to years of public dismissal. But because documentation is what I do. It's who I am, the iron ledger. They have no idea how deep that identity runs, how it was forged in the gap between who I was supposed to be and who I had to become, between the girl who deserved leftovers and the woman who reviews million-dollar budgets before breakfast. Nathan is watching me again from across the reception hall. He's abandoned his post at the bar, seems to be working up the courage to approach. His new wife clings to his arm, but his eyes keep drifting to table 23. To the anomaly in his carefully ordered world. I can see him trying to reconcile it. Boss and sister-in-law, Olivia Mercer Wells, and Nell, the woman who controls his career, and the ghost at the family gathering. The cognitive dissonance must be excruciating. Good. Let him sit with that discomfort. Let him marinate in the realization that he never really knew either of us. Not his boss, not his bride. That the world is full of shadows and parallel lives, of people who build themselves from scratch, while others inherit their identities wholesale. The band announces the father-daughter dance. William takes Morgan's hand with practiced grace, and they sway to something classical and forgettable. Victoria watches from the sidelines, her expression soft with satisfaction. The perfect family portrait, minus one inconvenient detail. But I'm not inconvenient anymore. I'm inevitable. Because tomorrow Nathan will have to return to work. We'll have to sit in meetings, I run, implement strategies I approve exist in the professional world I've carved out with my own hands. The secret's out now. He knows who I am, even if he doesn't understand what that means yet. And secrets I've learned have a way of spreading, like wine stains, like audit trails, like the truth, which always finds its way to the surface. The iron ledger doesn't forge entries. She just makes sure every column balances in the end. The story of how I rebuilt myself began in the darkness before dawn. My alarm would slice through silence at 4:30, when even Boston's financial district slept beneath streetlights. In those quiet hours, I learned the architecture of power from its foundation up. The Blackwell Financial Building stood empty when I first entered it, not through the gleaming revolving doors of the main entrance, but through the service entrance in the back alley. The same entrance I would later use years later to escort underperforming executives out without the indignity of a public exit. The janitor badge clipped to my uniform granted access to every floor, every office, every sanctum of privilege closed to me during daylight hours. I cleaned their desks before they knew my name, emptied their trash while learning their secrets, memorized their spreadsheets while wiping down their computer screens. My second job at the law firm taught me how wealth protected itself. My morning shift at the bakery taught me about hunger, not just for food, but for something more substantial: recognition, purpose, the chance to matter. On my 21st birthday, no cards arrived, no calls from family. But that morning, something unexpected happened in the pre-dawn hours of my cleaning shift. I was kneeling on the executive floor, scrubbing a coffee stain from the carpet outside the CFO's office, when a woman's voice startled me. "That dedication is wasted on carpet." I looked up to find Claire Bennett watching me from her office doorway. Known throughout Blackwell as the Dragon Lady, first female partner, notorious for arriving before sunrise and leaving after midnight. "Carpet stains don't give performance reviews," I said, continuing to scrub. She almost smiled. Almost. "No, but I do. What's your name? Olivia." "Just Olivia." I hesitated only a second. "Olivia Mercer Wells." That hyphenated surname felt like a cloak I'd fashioned from scraps, something to wrap around my shoulders against the cold of being nobody. A piece of my grandmother reclaimed. Claire Bennett studied me with the clinical attention of someone who made million-dollar decisions before breakfast. "I've seen you studying the financial reports on Hendrix's desk when you think no one's looking." My stomach dropped. 3 jobs night classes, the careful budgeting of every penny, all potentially destroyed in one observation. "I wasn't stealing information," I said. "No," she agreed. "You were correcting his math, in pencil, in the margins." The silence stretched between us like a tightrope. I hadn't denied it because denial would be useless with a woman like Claire. She dealt in facts, not excuses. "His calculations on the Peterson merger were off by 17 million, I finally said. "It changes the entire viability analysis." "I know, I caught it yesterday in the board meeting. Caused quite the stir. Hendrix tried to claim it was his discovery." The irony wasn't lost on me. My invisibility had become so complete that even my work could be stolen without credit. "Come in," Claire said, holding her office door wider. "And stop scrubbing my carpet. I have a better use for your attention to detail." That morning changed everything. Claire became my first mentor, though neither of us would have used that term. She was brutally demanding, coldly efficient, and completely meritocratic. She didn't care where I came from or what my last name might have been. She cared only about results. Within 6 months, I transferred from night cleaning to day accounting. Within a year, I had my own cubicle. Within 3, my own office. Small interior with no windows but mine, legitimately mine. The night classes continued. The MBA took 5 years of grinding effort, stolen sleep, and relentless focus. But by 27, I had credentials to match my capabilities. By 30, I had a team reporting to me. By 35, I oversaw divisions. And Nathan Wright was one of my first real challenges as a manager. I remember his initial presentation vividly. The confident swagger of Boston Brahmin privilege, third-generation Harvard, summer house in the Hamptons, the kind of connections that typically propelled men like him into corner offices regardless of competence. "The Midwest expansion represents a 12% growth opportunity," he declared to our executive team. "Conservative estimate." I let him finish his slides, all 23 of them, glossy professional, completely untethered from financial reality. When he concluded with a self-satisfied smile, the room turned to me. "Thank you, Mr. Wright," I said, my voice even. "Now walk me through how you arrived at these revenue projections." His confidence faltered, just a flicker. Industry standard growth models based on comparable market entries. Which comparables specifically? The Johansson report from last quarter. The metrics are industry recognized. I opened the folder before me, extracted a single page, and slid it across the table. The Johansson metrics apply to urban centers with populations over 2 million. Your expansion targets rural counties with average populations under 50,000. The demographic profiles are completely different. The room temperature seemed to drop. Nathan's smile became fixed, a rictus of professional panic. Furthermore, I continued, your expense calculations omit 3 critical factors: seasonal transportation limitations in northern counties, local regulatory compliance costs, and workforce training for specialized services. Correcting for these factors alone reduces your projected returns by approximately 60%, pushing the break-even point from 2 years to 5 at minimum. The silence that followed held the particular tension of witnessing a career imperiled. I could have ended him right there. Victoria would have. She would have savored the public humiliation, the spectacular failure, the confirmation of her own superiority. But I wasn't Victoria. I need this completely redone by Monday, with actual data, with realistic projections, with costs fully accounted for. I closed my folder. Because I think there is potential in the Midwest markets, just not the fantasy you're selling. Show me reality, Mr. Wright. That's the only thing I'm interested in buying. When the room emptied, he remained staring at his failed presentation. Why? He asked quietly. Why not just reject it outright? Because failure is data, Mr. Wright. What matters isn't whether you fail. It's what you build from the wreckage. 3 days later, he returned with a transformed proposal, meticulously researched, conservative in projections, innovative in approach, the work of someone who had confronted his own limitations and exceeded them. This is Martin Campbell, our CEO, flipped through the pages with raised eyebrows. Viable, I finished for him, with growth potential even beyond these conservative estimates if implemented correctly. I looked directly at Nathan. I'd like Mr. Wright to lead the implementation team. The shock on his face mirrored what I'd seen at the wedding. The cognitive dissonance of discovering that the narrative he'd built about the world contained critical errors. That had been 18 months ago. The Midwest expansion now represented 20% of our annual growth. Nathan Wright had proven himself not just competent, but exceptional once divorced from his own privilege. And I had confirmed what I already suspected: sometimes the greatest talent hides in people who have never been asked to actually earn their place. People like Morgan. My thoughts of my sister were interrupted by the gentle vibration of my phone. 4 missed calls from Nathan already. 11 text messages, each increasingly desperate. We need to talk. Please call me back. This changes everything. Did you know all along? Does Morgan know who you really are? The last one made me smile. Did Morgan know who I really was? Did anyone? The question itself contained the fundamental misunderstanding. There was no real me versus fake me. There was only the woman I had built piece by painful piece from the rubble Victoria left behind. I texted Nathan back a single line: Monday, my office, 8 a.m. Then I turned off my phone and drove home through Boston's glittering night to the apartment I had chosen for its view of the financial district. 30 stories up with windows that transformed city lights into constellations of possibility. From here, Victoria's social world looked microscopically small, a terrarium of wealth without purpose. But I didn't go straight to bed. Instead, I opened my home office safe and withdrew the folder I'd compiled over the past 7 months. The investigation that had begun by accident and evolved into something more purposeful. Not revenge, justice. The difference mattered to me even if it would look the same to Victoria. The first document detailed the initial discovery. A routine audit of potential acquisition targets had flagged an irregularity in a small property management firm in western Massachusetts. The kind of anomaly most analysts would overlook. A name matching Victoria's maiden name on incorporation papers for a shell company that dissolved 28 years ago, leaving behind a paper trail of property transfers. One property in particular caught my attention. A modest house in Ridgeline County, where court records showed a fatal car accident, had orphaned a 2-year-old girl named Morgan Hale. 3 months after the accident, adoption papers were filed. The adoptive parents, William and Victoria Mercer of Boston. The timing aligned perfectly with Morgan's appearance in our family, but the birth dates didn't match. According to official family records, Morgan was 2 years younger than her adoption papers indicated. A small discrepancy that opened the door to larger questions, like what happened to Morgan Hale's trust fund. The modest inheritance left by her biological parents had been placed in a conservatorship pending adoption. Once Victoria and William took custody, those funds should have transferred to a trust in Morgan's name, accessible, when she turned 25, but the money never made it to any trust bearing Morgan's name. Instead, it vanished into a labyrinth of transfers, emerging eventually in accounts controlled exclusively by Victoria. Accounts that funded educational enrichment and therapeutic support and developmental opportunities that cost exactly as much as Victoria's remodeled kitchen, her European vacations, her carefully cultivated image as Boston's most generous socialite. The evidence filled 3 folders: meticulous, undeniable, enough to trigger investigations by multiple agencies. But I hadn't pursued it, not yet, because unlike Victoria, I understood that destroying someone required more than evidence. It required timing, and the timing hadn't been right until tonight, until Nathan's shocked recognition exposed the double life I'd built. Now events would accelerate whether I wished them to or not. Nathan knew. Soon Morgan would know, and Victoria, always vigilant for threats to her carefully constructed world, would begin to investigate what else I might know about her. I needed to be prepared. I needed to understand not just what Victoria had done, but why. The financial manipulations were clear enough, but the deeper motivation, the need to erase one daughter while elevating another, remained opaque. The next part of my investigation had required professional assistance. Harold Richardson was a former FBI forensic accountant who now ran his own private investigation firm. I'd hired him 3 months ago to look into Victoria's background before she married William, to find the parts of her history she'd scrubbed clean when she ascended to Boston society. His report lay at the bottom of the stack. I hadn't opened it yet, some part of me hesitant to complete the picture, to see the full anatomy of the woman who had discarded me with such clinical precision. But tonight, with the wedding's artificial harmony shattered, it was time to know everything. Richardson's report began clinically enough. Victoria Hayes, born in Chicago's South Side to a single mother with addiction issues. Early life marked by instability, including periodic stays in foster care, when her mother was incarcerated or institutionalized. No contact with her biological father, listed as unknown on her birth certificate. Nothing surprising yet. The classic background Victoria would have been desperate to bury when she reinvented herself. Then came the details that shifted my understanding. At 17, Victoria gave birth to a daughter, father unidentified. The baby was placed for adoption immediately. No name recorded for the infant. Victoria left Chicago shortly after, changing her name from Vicky Hayes to Victoria Hale, creating the first iteration of her reinvented self. She worked as a receptionist at a Boston law firm, where she met William Mercer, then a promising young attorney from old money. They married when she was 20. I was born 2 years later. And that's when Richardson's report connected dots I hadn't anticipated. Victoria's obsessive control over family narrative, her creation of the perfect daughter in Morgan, her rejection of me, all potentially rooted in that first child, the one she gave up, the one who represented her origin story, the one who would have been approximately the same age as Morgan's biological mother. The synchronicity was almost mythic. Victoria adopting a girl who could have been her biological granddaughter, creating the perfect do-over for her own past, transferring all her hope, her ambition, her vicarious dreams onto this blank slate, while discarding the daughter who reminded her of choices made and paths not taken. I closed the folder and sat in the silence of my apartment. The city lights reflected in my windows, creating the illusion that I floated among stars, suspended between what was and what would be. Victoria hadn't just rejected me, she had rejected a version of herself. The part that struggled, that failed, that didn't fit the narrative of perfection she'd constructed. And in Morgan, she hadn't just found a daughter to favor. She'd found redemption for her own past. Understanding didn't excuse, but it contextualized. And context was something the Iron Ledger always required before closing the books. My phone vibrated again. A text from William this time. Brief, anxious. "We need to talk. Victoria doesn't know I'm contacting you. Please." I didn't respond. William had 37 years to talk to me, to stand up for me, to be the father he claimed to be when it cost him nothing. His sudden discovery of paternal concern coincided too neatly with the exposure of my professional identity. Besides, I had the safe combination now. Whatever he wanted to tell me, I could discover for myself. Monday arrived with the crisp inevitability of fall in New England. I entered Blackwell Financial at 6:30, 2 hours before my scheduled meeting with Nathan. The early morning light cast long shadows through the glass and steel structure as I rode the elevator to the 28th floor. My office stood as a testament to precision. No family photos cluttered the desk. No personal touches beyond the antique brass letter opener that had belonged to my grandmother, Diana Wells. The view from my windows encompassed Boston Harbor to the east and the financial district below, a kingdom built on numbers where bloodlines meant less than bottom lines. Jennifer Chen, my executive assistant, arrived at 7 with coffee and the day's briefing materials. Nathan Wright called again. She reported professional as always. 7 times yesterday, twice already this morning. I told him you're keeping your 8 o'clock with him. Thank you, Jennifer. Also, Martin wants to discuss the Singapore project before the board meeting. And the Richardson report you requested is complete. Hard copy only as specified. She placed a sealed envelope on my desk with the same efficiency she applied to everything. No questions about why her boss wanted background information on her own mother. No raised eyebrows at the unusual request for physical documents instead of digital files. Jennifer's discretion was one of her most valuable qualities. Will there be anything else? Clear my calendar after the Nathan meeting. I'll need at least 2 hours. Of course. She paused at the door. And Olivia, congratulations on the Singapore project approval. The board vote was unanimous. Martin will make the official announcement this afternoon. The Singapore expansion represented everything I'd built at Blackwell, a $5 billion investment in Asian markets that would transform the company's global footprint. My vision, my strategy, my team. After today's announcement, the acting would likely disappear from my title. Chief Operating Officer without qualifications or probationary status. The ultimate validation of my reinvention. At precisely 8, Nathan arrived. His normally impeccable appearance showed signs of strain, tie slightly askew, eyes shadowed from lack of sleep. The confident Harvard MBA replaced by a man wrestling with revelations that undermined his understanding of both his professional and personal worlds. "Close the door," I said. He complied, then stood awkwardly before my desk as if unsure whether this was a professional meeting or a family confrontation. "Sit down, Nathan." Again, he followed instructions. His hands fidgeted with his wedding band, new still unfamiliar on his finger. "You have questions." I said not a question, but an acknowledgement. "Why didn't you tell me?" The words burst out of him. All this time through the Midwest project, the quarterly reviews, the promotion. You knew I was dating Morgan. You knew I was marrying into your family. And you never said a word. "They're not my family." The statement held no bitterness, just factual precision. "They stopped being my family 14 years ago. "But you're Morgan's sister." "Biologically, yes. Practically, no." Nathan ran a hand through his hair, disheveling it further. "I don't understand. How could you sit in meetings with me, mentor me, promote me all while knowing I was engaged to your sister? How could you come to that wedding and let them treat you like that, like you were nobody?" "Because in their world, I am nobody." I leaned forward slightly. "And in my world, the professional world, you earned everything you received based on merit, not personal connection. I kept the spheres separate because that's what professionals do." "But Morgan," he began, then faltered. "Morgan doesn't know who I am professionally." I finished for him. Neither does Victoria. Or William, though I suspect he's pieced some of it together since the wedding. They've never asked what I do, never shown interest in my career. The name Olivia Mercer Wells means nothing in their social circles. Nathan's expression cycled through confusion, anger, and finally a dawning comprehension. They really have no idea, do they, that you're... He gestured vaguely at my office, the view the trappings of corporate power. No, they don't. And you never told them. All these years building this, achieving this, and you never threw it in their faces. What would be the point? I asked. Victoria's validation has never been my goal. Nathan absorbed this, his analytical mind visibly processing new information, recalibrating. There's more, isn't there? He asked finally. Something beyond the family estrangement. Something about Morgan. Now we reached the heart of it. The reason I'd granted this meeting. Not for my benefit, but for his. Because Nathan Wright, for all his privileged beginning, had proven himself capable of growth, of seeing beyond his own assumptions. What do you know about Morgan's adoption? I asked. He blinked, caught off guard by the directness of the question. Only what she's told me. That she was adopted as an infant. That Victoria and William are the only parents she's ever known. That her biological parents died in an accident. Not an infant, a toddler. And not just an accident. A very specifically timed and financially convenient accident. I opened my desk drawer and removed a single folder, slid it across the polished surface to him. What's this? He asked, not touching it. Information you should have had before you married into the Mercer family. Facts Victoria has spent decades concealing. About Morgan's origins. About the trust fund established for her by her biological parents. About where that money actually went. Nathan's hand hovered over the folder, then withdrew. I can't. This feels wrong, like I'd be betraying Morgan. The betrayal happened long before you met her, Nathan. Morgan was never the villain in this story. She was a child manipulated by a master. But she's not a child anymore. And the choices she's made as an adult have consequences. What choices? What are you talking about? Open the folder, Nathan. He did reluctantly. I watched his expression as he processed the contents. The documentation of financial transfers, the evidence of Morgan's trust fund being systematically drained, the pattern of educational expenses that never resulted in actual education. This can't be right, he murmured, flipping through pages. Morgan wouldn't know about this. Victoria must have done this without telling her. Turn to the last page. He did. And there it was, a bank statement from 3 years ago. Morgan's signature authorizing a transfer from the remnants of her trust to a personal account controlled by Victoria. Morgan had been 27 at the time, well past the age of consent or coercion. She knows, Nathan said quietly. Not a question, a realization. She's known since she was 16. That's when Victoria told her about her adoption, about the trust fund, about the special arrangement they had. No. Nathan shook his head. Morgan wouldn't participate in stealing her own inheritance. She wouldn't. I said nothing. Let the evidence speak for itself. Why are you showing me this? He asked, finally closing the folder. What do you want from me? I want nothing from you. This information isn't a weapon, Nathan. It's a choice, your choice, about what kind of life you want to build, about whether that life includes being complicit in Victoria's manipulations. He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Boston's financial district spread below people the size of ants moving with purpose through concrete canyons. I love her, he said, his back to me. Despite all this, despite whatever choices she made before me, I love Morgan. I know you do. He turned, surprising me with the determination in his expression. Then help me understand. Not just what happened, but why. Help me understand Morgan and Victoria and you, all of it. An unexpected request, not denial, not anger, but a desire to comprehend the complete picture. Sit down, I said again. This will take some time. For the next hour, I laid it out for him. Victoria's troubled childhood, the baby she gave up at 17, her reinvention as Victoria Hale, then Victoria Mercer, my birth and early years, the arrival of Morgan when I was 5, the gradual shift in Victoria's attention and affection, the increasing pressure on Morgan to be perfect to justify her adoption to validate Victoria's choice. She built Morgan into this ideal, I explained, the daughter who would redeem all Victoria's past mistakes, who would achieve everything Victoria couldn't, who would justify every sacrifice, every lie, every manipulation. And I was the reminder of struggle, of imperfection, of what happens when you don't control every variable. Victoria looked at me and saw everything she was trying to escape in herself. Nathan nodded slowly, piecing it together. So when you turned 18, she cut me loose, completely. No college funding, no support, no acknowledgement, the ultimate erasure. And you let her, Nathan said, not accusatory, but wondering. You didn't fight back. You didn't expose her. You just built this whole other life. I built what I needed, not what she would recognize. I gestured to the office around us. Victoria's validation was never the point. My own survival, my own success on my terms. That was always the goal. Until now. Nathan's eyes narrowed slightly. Something's changed. You're going to do something with all this information, aren't you? I considered him for a moment. The man my sister had married, the employee I had mentored, the unexpected bridge between my worlds. The Rosemont Children's Foundation annual gala is next Saturday, I said finally. Victoria chairs the board. It's her crown jewel, her proof of social relevance. I know, Morgan and I are expected to attend. So am I. Table 23, no doubt. In the shadows again. What are you planning? I smiled slightly. An audit, Nathan. A public reconciliation of accounts long overdue. His expression showed both apprehension and a grudging respect. Will this hurt Morgan? The truth often does, but less than continuing to live the lie Victoria has constructed for her. Nathan stood again, collecting himself, processing. In that moment, I saw what had made me invest in his potential, the capacity to absorb difficult truths and build something constructive from them. What do you want me to do? He asked finally. Nothing yet. Attend the gala, keep your eyes open. Make your own choices when the moment comes. He nodded once decisively. And Morgan, should I tell her about this? He gestured to the folder still open on my desk. That's between you and your wife. But consider this. Morgan has spent her entire life being told who she is by Victoria. Maybe it's time she had the chance to decide for herself. After Nathan left, I sat alone in my office looking out over Boston, the city where I'd rebuilt myself, where I'd transformed from discarded daughter to the Iron Ledger, where I'd learned that true power comes not from controlling others, but from mastering yourself. My phone vibrated with a text from William. The safe, you need to see what's inside before Victoria discovers you have the combination. Too late for warnings, too late for fatherly concern. William had made his choices long ago, choices of silence and complicity. But I would make mine with my eyes wide open. The Iron Ledger always balances her books, and Victoria's account was long overdue for reckoning. The Rosemont Children's Foundation. Annual gala represented everything Victoria valued. Reputation, status, the appearance of benevolence that masked calculated self-interest. For 30 years, she had built this charity into her personal monument, using it to cement her position among Boston's elite, while simultaneously building a fortress against her own impoverished origins. I arrived precisely at 8, wearing Armani instead of department store clearance. The dress was midnight blue, understated, but unmistakably expensive. My grandmother's pearls, the real ones, not the reproductions Victoria had given Morgan, rested against my collarbone. Small rebellions invisible to most, but significant to me. The Meridian Hotel's grand ballroom had been transformed for the evening. Crystal chandeliers reflected in polished marble. Ice sculptures dripped elegantly at the center of each buffet table. A string quartet played Vivaldi in the corner. Wealth performing charity for an audience of more wealth. Victoria stood near the entrance, resplendent in silver that caught the light like armor. William beside her, playing his familiar role of supportive husband. Morgan and Nathan had yet to arrive. I bypassed the receiving line entirely. No air kisses tonight. No pretense of family connection. Instead, I moved directly to the bar, ordered sparkling water with lime, and positioned myself where I could observe without being immediately noticed. The ballroom filled with Boston's financial and social elite. Old money mingled with new tech wealth. Inherited privilege rubbed shoulders with earned success. And through it all moved Victoria, the consummate hostess, the architect of impressions. "Ms. Mercer Wells," a voice said from behind me. Martin Campbell, Blackwell Financial's CEO, approached with a glass of scotch in hand. "I didn't realize you supported the Rosemont Foundation." "My interests are diverse," I replied, accepting his light kiss on the cheek. We had worked together for 7 years. Mutual respect had evolved into something approaching friendship. "Indeed they are. The board was quite impressed with your Singapore presentation yesterday. The vote was unanimous." "So I heard." His eyes twinkled. "I suppose congratulations are in order, Chief Operating Officer Mercer Wells. No more acting prefix." "Thank you, Martin. I should warn you, half the board is here tonight. Wentworth is particularly eager to discuss expansion timelines. I told him to give you the evening off, but you know how he gets when the smell of money is in the air." I smiled slightly. "I can handle Richard Wentworth." "You can handle anyone. That's why we promoted you." Martin's attention shifted over my shoulder, his expression changing subtly. "Isn't that Victoria Mercer, the chairman's wife?" I didn't need to look. "Yes." "Do you know her? She runs this foundation, doesn't she?" Our paths have crossed. Something in my tone must have communicated more than my words because Martin studied me with new interest. "There's a story there. There always is." He didn't press. Another reason we worked well together. Martin recognized boundaries and respected them. "Well, I should circulate. Donors to flatter, board members to reassure. You know the drill." He touched my elbow lightly. "Congratulations again, Olivia. You've earned this." After he left, I remained at my observation post. The evening proceeded according to its carefully orchestrated schedule. Cocktails, silent auction, dinner seating. Victoria had positioned me at a table near the kitchen doors this time. A slight improvement from table 23, but the message remained consistent. Peripheral, unimportant. I didn't take my assigned seat. Not yet. Instead, I approached the audiovisual booth tucked discreetly at the rear of the ballroom. The technician recognized me immediately. "Ms. Mercer Wells. We weren't expecting you tonight." "Change of plans, David. I need to make a slight adjustment to the presentation lineup." David hesitated. "Mrs. Mercer has been very specific about the program timing." "This won't disrupt her schedule. Just a small addition to support her message about transparency and helping vulnerable children." My tone suggested this was routine, expected, authorized. He hesitated only a moment before stepping aside. I inserted a flash drive into the system, queued up 3 specific files, and programmed them to display at precise moments during Victoria's keynote address. "Thank you, David. Your discretion is appreciated." He nodded, professional but confused. I slipped him my business card. "If there are any questions afterward, have them contact me directly." As I turned to leave, I nearly collided with Nathan. His eyes widened in recognition, then narrowed with understanding as he glanced from me to the AV booth. "What are you doing?" he asked quietly, moving us away from curious ears. "Preparing for an audit," I said. As discussed. Nathan's jaw tightened. "Morgan doesn't deserve public humiliation." Neither did I, for 14 years. "This isn't about you versus Morgan. This is about Victoria." He wasn't wrong. I studied him, this man caught between worlds. "Have you told Morgan what you know?" He looked away. "I've tried. 3 times. She shuts down completely, changes the subject, pretends she doesn't hear me." Denial is a powerful defense mechanism. Sometimes it needs to be broken from the outside. There has to be another way. I'm open to alternatives, but the statute of limitations on financial fraud is approaching for the earliest transfers. After that, Victoria walks away completely unaccountable. Nathan ran a hand through his hair, his wedding ring catching the light. "Just don't destroy her, please. Whatever Victoria's done, Morgan is still my wife. I still love her." The raw emotion in his voice gave me pause, not because it changed my objective, but because it reminded me that beyond balance, sheets and bank transfers, beyond justice and retribution, were human hearts with their own complex ledgers of love and pain. "Go back to her," I said. Be with her tonight, whatever happens. He nodded once, then disappeared into the crowd as the dinner chimes sounded. I made my way toward my assigned table, but paused when I spotted William standing alone near a window, staring out at Boston's nightscape. He seemed smaller, somehow, diminished by the weight of secrets kept too long. I approached silently, stood beside him without speaking. For a moment, we both gazed out at the city lights. "You never went to the safe," he said finally, not looking at me. "I didn't need to. What I saved for you doesn't matter now," I finished for him. "It's too late for secret funds or hidden letters or belated guilt, William. 14 years too late." He turned to me, then his face lined with regret that looked genuine, but changed nothing. "I wanted to protect you." "No, you wanted to protect yourself. From Victoria's anger, from difficult conversations, from having to stand up and be counted when it mattered." William flinched as if I'd struck him. "That's not fair. Neither was watching my college fund disappear while you said nothing. Neither was being erased from family photos while you stood silently by. Neither was eating leftovers at my sister's wedding while you pretended not to see. I put money aside. I don't need your money." The words came out sharper than intended. "I built my own life while you were building your comfortable silence." Someone announced dinner seating. William glanced toward the head table, where Victoria was already seated, scanning the room with narrowed eyes. "You don't understand what she's capable of," he said, almost a whisper. "I understand perfectly. The question is, do you understand what I'm capable of? What I've become without your protection?" Before he could respond, Victoria spotted us. Her expression shifted from social graciousness to tightly controlled fury in an instant. William straightened automatically, decades of conditioned response. "Go," I said quietly. "Your wife is waiting." He hesitated, caught between decades of submission and a moment of potential redemption. Then the moment passed, and he walked away without another word, the path of least resistance as always. I took my seat at the peripheral table surrounded by donors of modest means, the kind who received no recognition from Victoria, but whose contributions still funded actual children's programs. We introduced ourselves as the first course arrived. No one recognized my name. No one connected me to the Mercer family or to Blackwell Financial. I was a ghost at my own haunting. From this vantage point, I watched Victoria hold court at the head table. Morgan and Nathan had arrived seated in positions of honor. Morgan sparkled in designer couture, playing her role as the golden daughter. But Nathan's expression betrayed tension. He kept glancing in my direction, then away, his shoulders rigid with anticipation. Dinner proceeded with mechanical precision. Salad, entree, dessert, wine flowing freely except at my table, where the pours were noticeably modest. Another small slight invisible to most, but obvious to those who recognize the hierarchy of social value. After coffee, Victoria took the podium. The room quieted as she tapped the microphone, her diamond bracelet catching the light with each movement. "Distinguished guests, generous supporters, dear friends," she began, her voice modulated to project both authority and warmth. "Welcome to the 30th Annual Rosemont Children's Foundation Gala." Applause rippled through the room. Victoria smiled, accepting this tribute as her due. "For 3 decades, we have stood as a beacon of hope for vulnerable children across Massachusetts. Through your generosity, we have provided educational opportunities, medical care, and a pathway to success for thousands of deserving young people." The irony wasn't lost on me. Victoria speaking about supporting vulnerable children, while having systematically stolen from her own adopted daughter. About educational opportunities she never funded. About pathways to success she actively blocked in my case. Tonight, I want to share the stories of some of those children, to show you exactly how your contributions transform lives. The massive screen behind her illuminated. A slideshow began with professional photographs of smiling children. Victoria narrated each image with practiced compassion, the perfect performance of benevolence. Young Michael here received a full scholarship through our academic excellence program. He's now pre-med at Boston University. The image changed to a young girl playing violin. Sophia discovered her musical talents through our arts initiative. She recently performed at Carnegie Hall. Another image, another success story. Victoria in complete control of the narrative. Until she wasn't. Between the fifth and sixth slides, the system briefly flickered. For just 3 seconds, a different image appeared. A financial statement from 20 years ago. A transfer from Morgan Hale's trust fund into Victoria's personal account. The date and amount clearly visible. Victoria faltered mid-sentence, her eyes darting to the screen. By the time she looked back, the regular slideshow had resumed. Most guests probably attributed the glitch to technical difficulties, but Victoria knew. I could see it in the sudden rigidity of her posture, the tightness around her mouth. She continued her presentation, but her rhythm was disrupted. Her eyes scanned the crowd looking for the source of the interference. They found me just as the second document flashed on screen. This one showed adoption papers with inconsistent dates. Again, just a few seconds. A subliminal message that most wouldn't consciously register. But William saw it. And Morgan. And Nathan. Their expressions shifted in different ways. William with dawning horror. Morgan with confusion that morphed into recognition. Nathan with grim confirmation of what he already knew. Victoria powered through professional enough to maintain the facade of control. But the damage was done. Questions had been planted. Doubt introduced. The immaculate narrative cracked just enough to let truth seep through. When she finished her speech, the applause seemed subdued. Or perhaps that was just my perception. Victoria stepped away from the podium with practiced grace, but her eyes found mine across the ballroom with laser precision. The look contained multitudes, rage, fear, disbelief, and buried beneath it all, a flicker of recognition. She knew, finally knew who and what I had become. I remained seated as dancing began. Victoria would come to me now, the predator suddenly aware that what she thought was prey had grown claws and teeth of its own. Better to let her approach on my terms in public where her options for retaliation would be limited. It took 17 minutes. I counted each one, watching her circulate with increasing urgency. Making excuses to guests, conferring briefly with Morgan and Nathan, checking her phone repeatedly, looking everywhere but directly at me, until finally, inevitably, she stood before my table. Her smile remained fixed, but her eyes burned with controlled fury. "Nell," she said, voice pitched for privacy despite our public setting. "I need to speak with you. Outside." "No." Simple, direct, the power of refusal. Victoria's smile flickered. "This isn't a request. I'm aware. It's a demand. And I'm declining." The couple seated beside me shifted uncomfortably, suddenly fascinated by their dessert forks. Victoria leaned closer, dropping all pretense of social pleasantries. "Whatever game you're playing ends now. You have no idea what you're doing." I met her gaze steadily. "I know exactly what I'm doing. I'm balancing the books." "What are you talking about?" "Trust fund transfers, adoption fraud, tax evasion through charitable giving." "Shall I continue?" "Perhaps with specifics and amounts." The color drained from Victoria's face, leaving her makeup a mask on bloodless skin. "Not here," she hissed. "Why not?" "Isn't transparency the Foundation's stated mission, truth and accountability for the benefit of children?" Her fingers gripped the back of the empty chair beside me, knuckles white with restraint. "You've made your point." "I've barely begun." For the first time in my memory, Victoria looked genuinely afraid. Not angry, not controlling, but afraid. The shift altered the geometry of power between us, realigning 14 years of imbalance in a single exchange. "What do you want?" she asked the question, emerging strangled. "Justice. Money, position, public apology. Name it." I almost laughed. She still didn't understand. Still thought in terms of transactions and appearances. Still believed everything and everyone had a price. "I want nothing from you, Victoria. I want for you. I want consequences. Accountability. The same standards you've applied to everyone else finally applied to you." "You'll destroy this family. You destroyed it long ago. I'm simply bringing the ruins into the light." A commotion across the ballroom drew our attention. Morgan had risen from her seat, her face a storm of emotion. Nathan reached for her arm, but she pulled away sharply. William stood frozen, watching as his carefully constructed piece disintegrated. "She knows," I said quietly. "She's always known, hasn't she, about her trust fund, about where the money went, about the lies you built her life upon. Victoria's breathing quickened, the only visible sign of her distress. She was a child. She needed stability structure. She needed truth. She needed a mother, not a sculptor, trying to create the perfect daughter from raw material. You have no idea what I saved her from. I know exactly what you saved yourself from. The truth about your own past, your own abandoned child, the daughter you gave up before you decided to become Victoria Mercer. The shock on her face confirmed what I'd suspected. She had never imagined I would uncover that deeply buried secret, the original sin that had shaped all her subsequent choices. How did you— The iron ledger misses nothing, I said, rising from my seat. Every transaction leaves a trail. Every choice creates a record, even the ones you think are buried beyond recovery. I moved past her, headed toward the exit. I had done what I came to do, planted the seeds of truth that would grow whether Victoria wished them to or not. She caught my arm as I passed her, grip surprisingly strong. This isn't over. You're right, I agreed. It's just beginning. The Rosemont Foundation's financial records are being delivered to the Attorney General's office tomorrow morning. Your personal accounts are already under review by the IRS, and Morgan's adoption irregularities have been flagged with Family Services for historical investigation. Victoria's hand fell away as if burned. You would do this to your own family, my family. The words tasted strange in my mouth, bitter and sweet simultaneously. My family died the day you decided I wasn't worth college tuition while throwing Morgan a $30,000 birthday party. My family disappeared when you erased me from Christmas cards and summer vacations and Thanksgiving dinners. Don't appeal to family now, Victoria. You discarded that weapon long ago. I walked away, leaving her standing alone amid tables of Boston's elite. The woman who had orchestrated my exile, now experiencing her own first taste of isolation. Outside the Meridian, rain had begun to fall. Not the dramatic downpour of movie climaxes, but the persistent Boston mist that seeps through clothing and certainty with equal efficiency. I waited beneath the hotel's canopy for the valet to bring my car, watching raindrops create expanding circles and puddles, each action creating ripples beyond its initial impact. Just like Victoria's choices, just like my own. Olivia! I turned to find Morgan standing behind me. She had followed me outside without a coat, her evening gown already gathering moisture from the mist. Her makeup remained perfect, but her eyes held a wildness I'd never seen before. What have you done? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. What needed doing? You've ruined everything. The truth can't ruin what's real, Morgan, only what's false. She stepped closer and I noticed she was trembling. Not from cold, but from some emotion too complex to name. Those documents, the trust fund transfers, how did you find them? The same way I find everything. I followed the numbers. Why now? After all this time, why expose everything now? The question deserved an honest answer. Not for Victoria's sake, but for Morgan's, for the girl who had been both beneficiary and victim of Victoria's manipulations. Because you deserve the chance to be more than Victoria's creation, I said. Because the truth, however painful, is the only foundation worth building a life upon. Because 14 years ago I had to start over with nothing but truth, and it nearly destroyed me before it saved me. Morgan's carefully maintained composure cracked. A single tear traced down her cheek, followed by another. I knew, she whispered, about the money, about where it went, about the adoption dates being changed. I knew when I was 16 and found the papers in Mother's desk. She caught me, told me it was all for my benefit, that without her I'd have ended up in foster care or worse. And you believed her. I wanted to believe her, needed to believe someone loved me that much, would do anything to protect me. Morgan wrapped her arms around herself, suddenly small despite her designer gown and flawless appearance. What happens now? That depends on choices. Yours, Victoria's, William's. They'll hate me if I cooperate with any investigation. Perhaps. Or perhaps they'll finally see you. The real you, not the projection of Victoria's ambitions. Morgan looked at me with new eyes, as if truly seeing me for the first time. How did you do it? Build all this without them become whoever you are now. One day at a time, One choice at a time, one truth at a time. The valet arrived with my car. I moved toward it, then paused. The woman you've been pretending to be for Victoria isn't real Morgan. She never was. The question is, are you brave enough to discover who you actually are without her script to follow? I drove away before she could answer. Some questions each person must answer for themselves. Some journeys can't be shared or shortened. 3 days passed before the inevitable summons. William called early Monday morning, his voice carrying the weight of someone who hasn't slept. We need to talk. All of us. Victoria, she's agreed to everything. Full disclosure, complete transparency, whatever you want. What I want isn't negotiable, I said. Justice doesn't bend to convenience. Please, Olivia. The use of my chosen name rather than Nell registered as significant. A small acknowledgement of who I had become. If not for her sake, then for Morgan's. For the family's. The Rosemont boardroom, 3 o'clock. I named the place where so many family decisions had been made without my input, where my existence had been edited out of narratives and futures alike. The symmetry felt appropriate. The Blackwell financial offices buzzed with excited energy that morning. News of my promotion had spread. The Singapore project was moving forward. My team delivered preliminary timelines and projections with the efficiency I'd cultivated. Jennifer managed my schedule with her usual precision, clearing my afternoon without question when I mentioned a personal matter. At precisely 2:55, I entered the Rosemont Foundation's headquarters. The receptionist recognized me, but not as a Mercer, as the newly announced COO of Blackwell Financial, a potential major donor. Ms. Mercer Wells. We weren't expecting. The boardroom is ready for you. I navigated the familiar corridors, passing photographs of smiling children and framed press clippings about the Foundation's good works. Victoria's monument to her reinvented self. The boardroom door stood open. Inside, they waited like actors positioned for a final scene. Victoria at the head of the table, spine rigid with tension. William beside her, eyes shadowed with exhaustion. Morgan and Nathan opposite them, sitting slightly apart, a physical manifestation of shifting allegiances. I took a seat precisely halfway down the table. Not at the foot where I'd been relegated in the past. Not challenging Victoria's position at the head. A deliberate choice of neutral territory. Thank you for coming. William began his corporate lawyer training, evident in his careful phrasing. We've gathered to discuss recent events and find a path forward that serves everyone's interests. This isn't a negotiation, I said. It's an accounting. Victoria flinched visibly but remained silent, a first in my experience. Nevertheless, William continued, we believe there's a solution that addresses the legitimate concerns you've raised while preserving certain family considerations. I said nothing. Let silence do its work. In boardrooms and battlefields alike, the one who speaks first often concedes advantage. Morgan has agreed to forfeit any remaining trust funds, William said when the silence stretched unbearable. Victoria will step down as chairman of the Rosemont Foundation effective immediately. Full financial restitution will be made for any irregularities in fund management. And the adoption fraud, I asked. The tax evasion, the systematic financial abuse spanning decades. Those are allegations that would be difficult to prove in court, William said, slipping fully into lawyer mode. The statute of limitations. Stop. Victoria's voice cut through his legal maneuvering. Just stop, William. She turned to me, her perfect makeup unable to conceal the strain of the past 3 days. What do you want from me? An admission fine. I took the money. I changed the documents. I built this foundation partly to launder funds and reputation simultaneously. I did it all. Is that what you needed to hear? The raw confession hung in the air between us. Not the calculated contrition I had expected, but something closer to surrender. Why? I asked. The simplest question. The hardest to answer. Victoria looked away, her fingers tracing invisible patterns on the polished table. Because I was terrified. Every day. That someone would discover who I really was, where I came from, the child I gave up, the lies I told to escape poverty, that William would leave me if he knew, that his family would disown us, that everything I'd built would collapse. So you built Morgan into the daughter you wished you'd been, and discarded me because I reminded you of who you actually were. She didn't deny it. You were always too perceptive. Even as a child, you saw through things, through me. I couldn't control how you saw me, so you removed me from the picture entirely. Morgan spoke for the first time, her voice uncharacteristically uncertain. And you molded me into what your second chance, your do-over, was anything about our relationship real. Victoria's composure cracked further. I loved you, love you still. But yes, I saw in you a chance to rewrite my own story, to create the perfect daughter who would achieve everything I couldn't, who would never know hunger or fear or abandonment. While inflicting all three on your biological daughter, Nathan said quietly. His first contribution to the conversation landed with precision. William placed a folder on the table. We've prepared a settlement offer, financial compensation, public acknowledgement of Olivia's place in the family, a restructuring of the foundation with complete transparency going forward. I made no move to open the folder. And the legal consequences. If you proceed with authorities, the foundation collapses. Hundreds of children who actually benefit from its programs lose support. Victoria faces potential criminal charges. The family name your name too, regardless of how you've distanced yourself, becomes synonymous with scandal. That's the cost of truth, I said. A price Victoria has delayed paying for 30 years. Morgan leaned forward, her expression torn between anger and pleading. I know I have no right to ask anything of you. I was complicit. For years I knew and said nothing, took the benefits while watching you be erased. But the children who depend on Rosemont programs, they're innocent in all this. She had found the one argument that might reach me. Not family loyalty, not reputation, not even financial settlement. But the impact on those truly vulnerable. Children like Victoria had once been. Like Morgan before her adoption. Like I had become at 18, cut off from all support. I don't want your money, I said, pushing the folder back across the table. I don't want public acknowledgement or retroactive inclusion in a family that discarded me. I want accountability, real accountability. Name your terms, Victoria said. The three words must have cost her dearly. Victoria Mercer didn't accept terms. She dictated them. Complete financial forensic audit of the foundation. Every donor, every disbursement, every expense for the past 30 years. Conducted by an independent firm with results made public. William blanched. That would reveal everything, I finished for him. That's the point. The foundation continues only with complete transparency going forward. What else? Victoria asked, her voice hollow. Your resignation effective immediately. Morgan takes over as chairman with a completely new board selected for financial expertise rather than social connections. Morgan's eyes widened in surprise. You trust me with that responsibility after everything? I trust that you understand the cost of lies better than most now, and that you have the capacity to build something better from the ruins. Victoria's hands trembled slightly against the polished mahogany. Is that all? No. I turned to her fully. A public statement. The complete truth about Morgan's adoption. The altered documents. The misappropriated trust fund. Not to punish you, but because secrets like this don't die. They metastasize. Infect everything they touch. The room fell silent as the full weight of my terms settled over them. No financial settlement to be quietly deposited and forgotten. No face-saving partial admissions. Complete transparency. Complete truth. The one thing Victoria had spent a lifetime avoiding. If I refuse, she asked, though her tone suggested she already knew the answer. Then tomorrow morning, the Attorney General receives every document I've compiled. Every bank statement. Every forged document. Every tax filing with its deliberate misrepresentations. The choice between controlled disclosure and public investigation is yours. But disclosure will happen one way or another. Victoria closed her eyes briefly, the gesture revealing her age, in a way her carefully maintained appearance usually concealed. When she opened them again, something had shifted. The calculating defender of appearance had been replaced by someone more fundamental, more true. I'll do it, she said simply. All of it. William started to object, but she silenced him with a gesture. No more, William, no more hiding, no more manipulating, no more running from who I was and what I did. She looked directly at me. You won. Completely. This isn't about winning, I said. It's about truth. There's a difference. I stood to leave. My part in this family drama was concluding. The Singapore project waited. My real life, the one I had built from nothing but determination and ability, continued, regardless of how this particular account balanced. Nathan walked me to the door while the others remained seated, still absorbing the seismic shift in their carefully constructed world. What happens now? He asked. For Morgan, for you, for whatever remains of this family. That depends on what they build from the truth, what she builds. I nodded toward Morgan, who sat straight-backed and thoughtful at the table. She has potential beyond Victoria's narrow vision for her. Perhaps now she'll discover it. And you, will you reconnect with them once everything is disclosed? Find some kind of reconciliation? I considered the question seriously. I don't know, some bridges can't be rebuilt once burned. Some wounds leave scars that change the landscape permanently. But truth creates possibilities that lies never can. Singapore is a long way from Boston, Nathan observed. Yes, and that distance serves a purpose too. As I walked through the Foundation's corridors for perhaps the last time I passed the wall of donor photographs, Victoria's carefully curated gallery of social influence. At the end hung a mirror positioned so visitors could envision themselves among the Foundation's supporters. I paused before it, studying my reflection. Not Nell, the erased daughter, not the ghost at table 23, but Olivia Mercer Wells, the Iron Ledger, the woman who had built herself from nothing but truth and determination. Behind me, the boardroom door opened. Morgan emerged, her expression set with a new resolve I hadn't seen before. Olivia, she called. I turned, surprised by her use of my chosen name. She approached slowly, as if navigating unfamiliar terrain. I want you to know I'm going to make this right. Not just the Foundation. Everything. She took a deep breath. I've lived my entire life trying to be what Mother wanted. Perfect, compliant, grateful. I don't know who I am without that script. That's the most important discovery you'll ever make, I told. Who you are when no one is telling you who to be. How did you do it? Start over completely. Build something real. One day at a time. One choice at a time. One truth at a time. She nodded, absorbing this. The Foundation audit will begin tomorrow. I've already called firms for proposals. Her voice strengthened with each word. And I'm seeing a therapist to understand all of it. My role, the manipulation, the person I might become without Victoria's blueprint. Good. We stood in awkward silence, two women connected by blood and history, but separated by 14 years of enforced estrangement. I know we can't be sisters in any real sense, Morgan said finally. Too much has happened. But maybe someday we could be something, not defined by Victoria or the past. Maybe, I agreed. But that starts with you defining yourself, discovering who Morgan really is beneath the performance. I'd like to try. I nodded, once acknowledgement rather than commitment. Singapore launches in 6 weeks. I'll be relocating temporarily. I heard. Congratulations. Her smile contained genuine warmth for perhaps the first time in our adult relationship. You built something remarkable, Olivia, without any of us, despite all of us. Yes, I did. As I walked away toward the elevator and the street beyond, I felt a curious lightness, not the euphoria of victory or the satisfaction of revenge, but something cleaner. The balanced books of a ledger properly maintained, the completion of an audit long overdue. My phone vibrated with a text from Jennifer. Board formally announced your appointment. Full press release going out tomorrow. Wentworth wants to discuss Singapore over dinner tonight. Yes or no? I replied immediately. Yes, Dorcia, at 7. Beyond the Foundation's doors, Boston stretched in afternoon sunlight. The financial district where I had carved my empire. The streets I had walked at 20, hungry and determined. The city that had witnessed my transformation from discarded daughter to the Iron Ledger. Victoria's reckoning would unfold in public statements and forensic audits. William would finally face the consequences of his calculated silence. Morgan would begin the difficult work of self-discovery without Victoria's controlling vision. Their story would continue reshaped by truth, but still fundamentally their narrative. But my story moved forward along the path I had chosen. The Singapore project, the promotion, the life constructed through determination rather than inheritance. Their revelations had liberated me not because they changed anything fundamental about my circumstances, but because they confirmed what I already knew. I had never needed their validation, their approval, their acceptance. I had built something more valuable than family obligation or inherited position. I had built truth, brick by brick, number by number, choice by choice. The iron ledger closes no account without complete reconciliation. Victoria's books were finally balanced. And mine. Mine continued forward, each page fresh with possibility, each entry made with the precision of someone who knows exactly what they're worth. Not because someone told them, but because they calculated it for themselves, column by careful column, until the sum total reflected not what others believed, but what they had built with their own hands. 6 weeks after the Rosemont Foundation revelation, I stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows of my new office at Blackwell Financial Singapore. 40 stories above the bustling metropolis, the city-state spread before me like a tapestry of ambition realized. Marina Bay glittered in the distance, its iconic triple towers supporting the sky bridge that seemed to float among clouds. Not unlike what I had built, something that appeared to defy gravity, but actually stood on meticulously engineered foundations. The Singapore expansion represented $5 billion of strategic investment across Southeast Asian markets. My vision, my calculations, my risk assessment. The board had removed acting from my title 2 days after the gala. Chief Operating Officer Olivia Mercer-Wells. No qualifications, no asterisks. Just acknowledgement of what I had earned through relentless competence. My new office still held the faint scent of fresh paint and possibility. Unlike my Boston space, I had allowed myself a single personal touch, my grandmother Diana's antique brass ledger now displayed on a simple stand near my desk. The Wells legacy reclaimed on my terms. The phone on my desk chimed softly. Jennifer's voice came through the speaker. Ms. Mercer-Wells, the Jakarta team is ready for your call, and you've received another email from Morgan. Thank you, Jennifer. I'll take the Jakarta call now. After concluding the conference call project timelines proceeding precisely as projected, I opened Morgan's email. Unlike the terse, obligatory family communications of the past, these messages had developed their own rhythm over the past 6 weeks. Substantive, thoughtful, real. The Rosemont audit had been completed. As expected, it revealed 30 years of financial manipulation, but also genuine good accomplished, despite Victoria's self-serving intentions. Morgan had restructured the board entirely, replacing Victoria's social connections with financial and child welfare experts. Most surprisingly, she had used the remainder of her trust fund to establish a scholarship program specifically for students from foster care. A photo accompanied the email. Morgan at a community center opening without designer clothes or perfect makeup. She looked different, less polished, more present, building something real from the ruins of Victoria's carefully constructed illusion. William had sent a single message after my departure, not asking for forgiveness or relationship, just forwarding Diana's journals with a note. These belong with you. I was reading them slowly, discovering the grandmother. I'd never known another woman who had built herself from nothing, who had kept meticulous records of her journey. Victoria remained silent, facing legal consequences certainly, but the greater punishment was undoubtedly the dismantling of her carefully constructed facade. The truth she had spent a lifetime avoiding had finally found her, as truth inevitably does. The Singapore skyline changed as afternoon shifted to evening. Lights appeared like stars emerging, each representing businesses, homes, lives being lived. From this height, individual struggles blurred into patterns, systems, the larger architecture of human endeavor. But I never forgot that every spreadsheet, every projection, every efficiency represented real people with real consequences. I had lived too long at the receiving end of decisions made by those who forgot the humanity behind the numbers. As night fully descended, I gathered my things to leave. Tomorrow would bring meetings with potential partners in Thailand, Vietnam, and Malaysia. Markets untapped, opportunities unexplored. The professional world I had built continued expanding, driven by the same determination that had carried me through those first desperate months after Victoria's rejection. But something had shifted. The weight of proving myself to Victoria, to the world, even to myself, had lightened. The ledger had balanced, the accounts had cleared. What remained was not obligation or vindication, but possibility. My phone buzzed with a text from Claire Bennett, my first mentor now in Singapore, to assist with the expansion. Dinner, new place on Orchard Road you'll appreciate. Remarkable female chef. Built her restaurant empire after being disowned by her family for pursuing culinary school instead of marriage. I smiled and replied, "Perfect. See you at 8. As I rode the elevator down through the gleaming tower, I thought about ledgers and balance sheets, about debts and payments, about how we account for our lives. The iron ledger had closed the books on one chapter. Victoria's account was settled, but my own ledger continued forward, each page blank with possibility, each entry made with the steady hand of someone who had learned the most essential truth. Your value is not determined by those who cast you aside, but by what you build from the empty spaces they leave behind.